Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to CEO Growth Talks. I'm your host, Pete Hayes, and we are live today, really live. It's my pleasure to welcome Taylor St. Germain of ITR Economics. What is a senior economist at ITR Economics, Taylor? And I know I've known you for a bit, and I just can't wait to hear this explanation.
Yeah, we've got all different types of economists. We have folks that specialize in forecasting, consulting, public speaking. I'm more in the public speaking and consulting world. And when I'm not behind the computer, I'm traveling the country, traveling the world, delivering economic keynote presentations to our different clients and businesses to help them prepare for the future and what's to come.
Oh, man. And if you've had the pleasure of seeing and hearing Taylor speak, it is awesome. I think folks that know ITR Economics, they're familiar with Alan and Brian Bulio. And sometimes after you hear one of them talk, you go, oh my gosh, how could anybody at ITR stand up to those two guys? But you do. It's fantastic. And you get great scores and ratings. And I know everybody loves seeing you out live. So if you get a chance to see Taylor live, you definitely want to do that. But today, we're going to talk about the economy. And Taylor reminded me earlier, just before we went on, he goes, what a great day to be on, because not the GPT, but the GDP came out today. And in case you didn't hear, Taylor, tell us about the news today.
Yeah, great news from a GDP standpoint. Of course, the first quarter, we had mild decline in GDP, and that scares everyone because the old definitions, 2 consecutive quarters of decline means we're in a recession. The good news was the GDP reading for the second quarter was positive. It came in at 3% in terms of an annualized rate, and that was above economists' estimates of 2.3%. So GDP is outperforming economists' estimates. We're positive. The economy is growing. Consumer spending strong. Doesn't get much better than today's reading for GDP.
Yeah, and for ITR Economics, you guys are on you're pretty good at calling these shots, because you said, hey, come second half of the year, we should look pretty good. And of course, this is even a reflection of the end of the first half. But what made you guys so bullish about the economy being as strong as it is?
Yeah, I will say it took a lot of convincing in the second quarter to share with everyone that it is a strong path forward because there was so much uncertainty. But when we look at the underlying data, especially on a weekly basis, we were saying everything looks strong. Folks are still in the stock market. There's not a run to the bonds or the cash. There was no flight to safety happening. Banks are lending a record amount of money. The weekly economic index from the Fed continued to show between 2 and 3% growth throughout the quarter. And I'd say the most important thing is CapEx finally started to pick up. CapEx was negative. Nobody was spending money. Everyone was sitting and waiting. And finally, in the second quarter, we saw that accelerate. The last thing I'd highlight is the consumer spending. 2/3 of our economy is the consumer. So we pay close attention to the consumer. And despite the uncertainty, we continue to spend right through it. And that all creates a positive GDP number.
Now, does that show up mostly in retail, or does that include residential housing, or what are the indicators for consumer?
I am primarily referencing retail sales. We forecast retail sales in our trends report for those of you that have access. And retail sales is growing, but growing above the pace of inflation. So we know it's not just pricing that's driving the growth. There really is volume growth out there. And, despite consumer sentiment being down, which freaks everyone out, our consumer spent at a record high. So some of these sentiment type indicators, the feelings indicators, were really what we're scaring folks. But our job is to show you that, hey, that's just feeling, that's just sentiment. The underlying data shows that our consumers very healthy, especially from a retail sales standpoint.
Well, given consumer sentiment and the growing kind of retail nature of the stock market, I mean, how much of that do you think is emotional high, or how much of it is really reflecting the reality of profit in public companies?
So we always highlight that the sentiment indicators are great stock market indicators, but they're not great indicators of the broader economy.
Okay.
Everybody always asks me, how's the economy doing? I say, great. And they say, well, the stock market's doing this. The stock market is not the economy, folks. GDP and the S&P are completely different things. I will say there's a record amount of corporate cash on the sidelines. There has been. We're still seeing corporate profits growing, although it's at a slower pace. So there is a lot of reason the stock market should still be exciting and growing, not to mention our government spending a lot of money, which, despite our concerns to the long term, typically buoys the stock market. But I would say the underlying fundamentals of the economy are so strong, despite the consumer sentiment because of the tariff uncertainty. There was a lot of reasons the stock market should perform well and the economy should continue to perform well.
Okay, so let's talk about the industries that have you the most excited. What industries are driving things forward right now, and what are you excited about? What dynamics are you seeing in which industries?
I always like to start at a broader level. The service industry always outperforms the manufacturing industry. That has always been the case. We encourage manufacturers to start providing services to diversify their business because the service sector always outperforms. It has for the last 15 years. But within manufacturing, I'm not saying things aren't growing. There are still markets that we're excited about, but they're mostly the high-tech industries. So think of things like electrical equipment, semiconductors, communications equipment, computers and electronics. That's where a lot of the growth in our manufacturing sector is right now. You know, what I call the legacy manufacturing, which is the automotive, the machinery, that's been relatively flat over the last decade, while the high-tech industry has been linear growth. So we can get pretty granular into it, but the industries I'm most excited about, again, service industry, consumer-led industries, as well as some of the high-tech manufacturing, especially with the onshoring that we're continuing to see.
So you bring up automotive. ITR recently published some blogs about, hey, watch out, automotive industry. Is that a general statement? Is that how much of that has to do with the relief of federal assistance and EVs and such, and kind of the whole kind of EV slowdown, and what's going on automotively?
You know, the automotive industry is that one industry that does correlate with sentiment indicators. So when consumer sentiment's down, people are not buying new vehicles. And that's exactly what's happening today. Just yesterday, our chief economist, Brian, he presented the correlation between consumer sentiment and automotive retail sales. And while the rest of the economy doesn't care much about consumer sentiment, the automotive industry very, very much does. We are seeing higher auto delinquency rates right now on loans. And again, with consumer sentiment down, they're likely going to hold off on that vehicle purchase. So yeah, sentiment does play into the auto industry disproportionately to the rest of the economy.
So quickly going back to retail sales, how do those things compare? How someone's buying a new set of clothes, but not so confident that they're going to go out and buy a new vehicle? Is it come down to that, or?
Yeah, it's the really big purchases when consumer sentiment's down, like a vehicle, that tend to feel the pain. So yeah, we're still going to restaurants, we're traveling, we're buying new clothes, absolutely doing all those things. But automotive, new car purchases, new housing purchases as well, those are the things that really go through some challenging times when consumer sentiment's weak.
Okay, so we're kind of leading ourselves there, but what are the least exciting, or maybe the industries that are the sectors that are most in a tough spot right now?
The big highlight for me is commercial construction for this year. That is the area I'm most concerned about. Now, it's not every commercial construction vertical. If you're building schools or hospitals, there's still great growth out there. But if you're in retail, in office, you know, those are the areas that we're seeing double-digit negative growth rates. So that's commercial construction. And I think this is important for everyone to know. Commercial construction always lags behind the economy. So the pain that the manufacturing sector went through in 2024, commercial construction is going to feel this year. It's always that 12-month lag time. That's why I'm generally more concerned about commercial. But again, there's always pockets of opportunity depending on the vertical. The other thing I'll mention is architecture billings data is something we watch very closely for any of you out there in the commercial space. And that data is very weak right now, which just means the architects aren't as busy. And that typically tells us there's weakness in commercial coming. So I'd say most every market we're quite bullish on in the second half of this year and into 26. Commercial construction is the one exception.
Okay, but if knowing my ITR, I know I always see the train, and so and you started to tell us this, but commercial construction should be recovering when we see.
Yeah. Commercial construction will be, again, we see another 3 or 4 quarters of weakness in commercial construction broadly.
Okay.
Commercial construction just entered what we call phase D, the recession
Right.
phase of the cycle. By the time we're into mid 2026, commercial will be back on the upswing. It's just that lag time is going to create some weakness over the next 4 quarters.
Okay. And right when we were starting this discussion, one of our attendees, Pear, had asked the question, how is commercial construction performing?
Yeah. And I will say there's areas we're very optimistic about. We expect warehouse construction to do well. We expect, of course, data centers, double-digit growth we have forecasted for 3+ years. So there's definitely pockets of opportunity, but again, some of that legacy office retail, that's really where our concerns are.
Okay. Any other industries that you have your eye on that you're concerned with?
If I think back to our trends report, we have most every industry positive, if not by the end of the year in 2026. So manufacturing as a whole, very optimistic. Consumer industries, very optimistic. That one headwind I have been warning everyone about is commercial. So I would say, there are some industries that might not grow as quickly as we'd like in 2025, later this year and into 26, but still improving from where we're at. Commercial is really the only one that stands out to me.
Jim just asked a question. Are you seeing AI replacing certain jobs in certain industries at this point? Probably not in commercial construction, at least not yet. The robots are coming, but they're not building quite yet. But
some of the entry level, what I'd call white collar positions, you do see some of the early signs of replacement. But more broadly, we're really just seeing AI make us all more efficient right now, rather than actually replacing us humans. Of course, we expect in the future there's going to come a time where that changes. But right now, most of the AI implementation really is driving efficiency of human beings rather than replacing them.
Okay, and I'm going to do a crazy Ivan here right now, because we were talking earlier. Crow acquired ITR Economics just about a year ago, and talk to us about how that gives ITR some additional firepower, because it'll take us back to this topic, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We were acquired by Crow LLP just about a year ago. They're historically an accounting firm. And so they give us a lot of brain power that we didn't have as economists. We have now tax advisors. We have their audit team. We've got their market intelligence team. And the one I'm most excited about is the AI consulting work that they do. Crow has its own AI model, and we spend a lot of time with Crow helping clients implement AI into their business strategies. So yeah, we've been really excited about the resources that Crow's been able to provide us with, and we're even incorporating some of that AI into our forecasting models today.
I'm a huge fan. Everybody that knows me knows I'm a huge fan of ITR. The monthly trends report is ridiculously valuable. It just helps you begin to look around the corner. And so whether it's your own business or if you're in a services business like we are, it helps us help our clients look around the corner as to what's coming. One of the underused ITR resources, I think, is your datacast service. And that is phenomenal, because it allows you to take your own company's data, and it'll do a correlation to some 900 or something different indicators. Is that where it is?
Yeah, depending on the level of subscription you get access to different data sets of indicators. But you're exactly right. That's a lot of the work I do when I'm not presenting, is running those correlation analysis for businesses so they can see what their leading indicators are, so they can plan for when these downturns or upswings are happening. So yeah, a really valuable tool that really gives you access to our entire database of indicators.
Yeah, let me give you an example. So your data, your swings, your growth and decline rates, right? The rate of change correlates to some other, but it may be offset. So you may be lagging some other indicator that has the same shape that you have. And as a result, as that indicator heads in a certain direction, you can, with pretty good confidence, because you use multiple indicators, you don't just use one, I know, But then you're able to look around the corner, basically say, oh, well, we're going to follow that. So in 12 months time, we're going to be in this situation. So let's make decisions now, anticipating that.
That's it. Our mantra at ITR is we always want our clients to be thinking a business cycle ahead. And that's what that leading indicator analysis allows you to do. You can see all these nice correlations and how it's predicted your business historically, so you can be confident in the decisions you're making and the trajectory you're headed in.
So let me just throw a wrench in that whole thing. So when crazy things happen, when black swans happen, like wars and things that throw global or regional economies inside out, or maybe tariff behaviors from the administration. So let's talk about this. I mean, how do you all look out for tariffs, and what industries? I mean, it's kind of this. Some of it's obvious. We've talked about it a bit, but Karen's asking us, what industry impacts do you see from the tariff actions that have happened and the ones that we're still anticipating?
Yeah, the first, and I know it's not the sexiest answer for everyone, but the first thing I always say is industries. It depends on your exposure to the markets abroad. We shared this really interesting chart in one of our presentations that showed, petroleum and coal, for example, 90% of that production takes place domestically. Am I that worried about that industry from tariffs? No. But then if I look at computer and electronics, 85% of that industry is imported into the US. So I'm much more concerned as far as disruptions from tariffs for an industry that's heavily weighted to imports rather than being produced domestically. So you really do have to take an industry by industry approach. The impact from tariffs is inflation, as Karen alluded to in her question. We haven't seen much of that inflation yet, but it's coming. And that's what we highlight to a lot of folks is when tariffs are announced, folks think tomorrow we're going to see higher prices, or even 3 months from now. A lot of our research that we've done says we actually don't really feel the tariff impacts for 9 to even sometimes 19 months later. So the tariff impacts, yes, they're disruptive to the supply chain. Yes, certain industries will face greater impacts than others. But the real component, the inflation component that we're worried about, that's coming. And that really is our biggest concern with tariffs is how do we protect our profit margins when all of our costs are increasing? And we have the rate of inflation picking up second half of this year and into 26. So one thing I want to be clear with everyone, even though I'm all excited about this economic growth over the next few years, we have economic growth in our forecast through 2028. All of that growth is going to come at a higher cost. And that to me is the biggest challenge for business leaders, business owners is, yes, your sales and revenue are going to grow, but at the same time, so are your costs. So how do you maintain a healthy profit margin? And tariffs is one part of the equation that has us thinking that way.
Wow. That's why you need ITR. You need the trends report. You might want to use DataCast. You might want to hire Taylor or one of his colleagues to work on just your business, your industry sector. You guys are the best. Okay, GDP, healthy. Tariffs may be a little more reasonable. The impact is maybe down the road. So the Fed tends not to act when GDP is strong, and they tend to act when inflation is happening. So what the heck's going on with the Fed, and what should we expect?
Yeah, well, just 7 minutes ago, I got the notification on my phone that the Fed held rates steady. And that is what we were expecting them to do. Coming into the year, and we chatted about this before we jumped on, Pete. Coming into the year, we expected the Fed to lower rates. And then President Trump comes into office and implements this tariff policy. And you could see the Fed immediately freeze going, whoa, if this is the direction the president's going to take the economy, then we have to be very careful about how quickly we lower rates if we do at all because of the inflation component to tariffs. As the Fed evaluates the economy, most folks expected them to hold rates steady today. And then when I saw the GDP number come in so strong, I said, they're definitely holding rates now because we have some strong economic growth. The Fed really uses that Fed funds rate to, stimulate investment, stimulate economic growth by dropping that, and then conversely slowing down inflation when they're raising the rate. We just see inflation staying too stubborn. I know it's closer to the 2% target, but it's still not at a level where I think the Fed's comfortable lowering rates. And they're also worried about this future inflation component when we look at the labor market, when we look at tariffs, and government spending that we're seeing, all of which are inflationary. So I would agree with the Fed. I know that's not what everyone wants to hear, especially if you're trying to buy a home, but I don't see inflation being low enough to where the Fed's comfortable. And I think that was reflected today. And as we look forward, I'm not ruling out a rate cut for the rest of the year, but my base case is that rates stay steady for the most of the rest of 25.
Okay. All right. Because I know you guys had said maybe we'd see a couple of cuts this year.
Yep.
Earlier you mentioned that corporations are sitting on quite a bit of cash, and that would seem also to be another reason. They've got cash; they don't need to borrow. The stimulus of a rate change may not be the thing that they're waiting for. Am I thinking correctly on that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. One thing that was a laggard, I will say, in the first half of the year was CapEx. When the tariff announcement came in and all this uncertainty happened, the problem with uncertainty in the economy is it causes everyone to go into this wait and see period. That's not good for economic growth, right? We want folks investing and spending. So that was worrying in the first half of the year. But with just the latest month of data, CapEx has gone from a negative growth rate to a positive growth rate, and that's without interest rates changing at all. We have record high CapEx forecasted by the time we're back into the first quarter of 26. So spending is going to happen because the demand pull is going to be so significant. We have to spend to keep up with the growth, which is why I'm not spending a whole lot of time focusing on interest rates. I'll still say we run interest rate correlation analysis against most of our clients' data, and I'd say 90% of our clients are not sensitive to interest rates. So I think sometimes we do blow this interest rate perspective a little bit out of proportion.
Okay. We're probably both looking at Andy's comment here about the revenue coming from infrastructure work funded by government agencies, recently seen staffing reductions of both federal and state, opportunities for them in terms of new work and strategic hires. Are there broader economic or industry signals that they should be watching, or ways they should be positioning themselves to take full advantage of the shift? Is that making sense?
Yeah, we do look at a lot of the public infrastructure, state and local spending. For Andy's question specifically, one series we look at is public infrastructure spending, and state and local tax revenue is a perfect leading indicator for it. So we do forecast both the private and public markets. One other mention that I'll highlight is the new work and strategic hires. Besides higher inflation, my biggest challenges for businesses over the next 5 years is you're not going to have enough people. We are going to move into a period where the labor shortage is more significant than anything we've really been used to in history.
Now, is that across blue collar, white collar? It
is more blue collar manufacturing, construction type labor, but that's not saying we won't see some of that. The reason for the tightness is we have the baby boomers leaving the workforce. And despite my best efforts, I've got a 10-month-old, but we didn't have enough kids. And so as a result, we just don't have the young people replacing the baby boomers because the baby boomers are such a big generation. We have labor costs rising 28% over the next 5 years. That is our labor forecast. You're talking 5 to 6% a year if we're just being simple. We're not used to that in this country. So any hiring you can do in the second half of 25 before this economy is really roaring in 2026 is going to be beneficial. And, Andy's question highlights that point. With some of those government workers becoming available, we're going to need people, and we're going to be really struggling to hire and retain these people over the next 5 years because there's so much work out there and just not the people.
That's really interesting.
AI is a big part of helping us solve that problem too. And that's why, AI, automation, robotics, this has to be the solution. Most investments we're seeing businesses make today are capacity and efficiency investments, and those are directly related to AI and automation.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing the same thing, and it just seems to be changing, whether it's the impact of AI or the hesitancy to hire full-time, the ability to have a remote workforce. And, a lot of companies are kind of half pregnant on some of that stuff. But as folks know, if they know Chief Outsiders, we're in the fractional executive business for growth executives, sales and marketing in particular. And we also provide fractional resources to get things done, to staff marketing and sales teams. And we're just seeing the beginning of a burst of demand to have that flexibility, to drop people in, because you've got the remote capabilities now, the extra lift of AI, which not only makes people more efficient, but helps people work even better together because they can use each other's tools and work. So in any case, I'm sorry for the short commercial on Chief Outsiders, but that's what we're seeing as well. Yeah. So we just had a tsunami. Thank goodness there wasn't a massive destruction, and at least that I've read about yet. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, but what's the tsunami that we're in the middle of? What is the thing that is making things rise and fall?
Yeah. Well, I usually have a negative connotation to tsunami. And so I have to highlight the thing that I'm worried about the most still is the government spending portion. You know, a lot of folks were very excited when the One Big Beautiful Bill came across. And listen, I'm not saying there aren't good things to that bill. There aren't stimulus benefits that will cause a little bit of the rise. But I see the tsunami coming crashing to land still as we look deeper down the line because of the national debt. So I want everyone to know we're very excited about the next 5 years. ITR does not have a recession in our forecast all the way through the end of 2029. You should be preparing your business today for consecutive years of growth. But by the time we get into this 2030 period, that's when the tsunami comes crashing down for us, especially as we think about the national debt, and things like the One Big Beautiful Bill make me more concerned about that time frame.
It didn't relieve and for those of you who don't follow ITR economics, they have forecasted for many years now. I think it's maybe 8 years.
Yeah, even longer. I think our president and CEO started writing their book and published the book in 2014. So
yeah, so the book is called Prosperity in the Age of Decline, which was an early forecast of a depression, a major depression, not a recession, coming in the 2030s. They repeatedly and regularly report on it, and the time frame hasn't changed. And what you were just saying is, yeah, just like you've said, we're going to have a strong second half of this decade, and then look out, because what are the things that we're going to see that are going to make up this depression?
The 5 drivers of this for us, we highlight these 5 every presentation. It's demographics, which again is the baby boomer situation we find ourselves in many other countries find themselves in, by the way. So it's demographics. Healthcare and Social Security costs are number 2 and 3. Those costs rise a lot as we have an older generation. That adds to national debt. So demographics, Social Security costs, healthcare costs, inflation, and national debt. Those are the 5 drivers. You've heard me talk about a few of these. Again, demographics, that drives higher healthcare costs, higher Social Security costs, increases our debt, increases our interest payments on the debt. There's all sorts of repercussions. ITR's forecasting higher inflation, as we've already mentioned. That's the big challenge of these next few years, is dealing with the higher costs. And this all creates a situation where we grow more concerned about the national debt. So those are the 5 drivers of why 2030 takes place. And there's a lot of information in 2030 on podcasts that I host, as well as our website. But the thing I'd really want everyone to know is recessions and depressions are the best times to be in business if you're prepared for them. I know a lot of times we talk about 2030 at ITR and the next downturn as this scary thing. And it is. There's going to be pain associated with it. Absolutely. But if you take advantage of these next 5 years and all this growth that's coming and put yourself in a position where you're proactive, not reactive to a downturn, there's so many great things that happen in downturns. You can be buying businesses at a discount, machinery, equipment, hiring people. Downturns can be the most profitable phases of the business cycle if you're ready. So that's really what I'd want people to know is 5 years of economic growth forecasted. Enjoy the 5 years, but make sure you're keeping the next downturn in your forward look, so that as you are investing in your business and growing, you can be preparing the war chest so you're ready for 2030.
Hence the great title, Prosperity in the Age of Decline.
Right.
How do you prosper? So the book is still very useful. Prosperity in the Age of Decline. Also, they have regular blogs. If you haven't been reading these, you want to be a subscriber to the ITR Trends Report. There's some mini versions of that for very, very low dollars just to stay in touch. But you should be regularly tapping ITR Economics for their outlooks, for their opinions, because it's going to help you and your business and as well personally, especially as we prepare for this end of the decade situation. Well, Taylor, this has been a pleasure as usual. I didn't mention that Taylor had been our guest at our national meeting a couple of years ago. Actually, we at this last year and then 2 years before. So we've had you a couple of times, I think, now at the Chief Outsiders National Meeting. But we're such huge fans of ITR Economics. If you work with Chief Outsiders, talk to your Chief Outsider about also how to take advantage of ITR Economics, because we work well together. So Taylor, thank you so much. Fantastic, packed 30 minutes, and hope everybody follows up with ITR Economics, all their great data, follow the blogs. Any last comments, Taylor, as we prepare for the next prosperous 4.5 years?
Just be careful with the media, folks. I'd remind everyone that find sources where you can look at what the underlying data is telling you, because I think you'll be preparing much differently for the next few years than if you're reading the media. We're very optimistic. There's a lot to be excited about, and I hope you're planning with a growth mindset right now, even in times of uncertainty, because there's a pretty strong path ahead as far as we're concerned.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, everybody. Join us next time at CEO Growth Talks. Bye-bye.